Should we scrap council tax discounts for single people? Now, the Prime Minister has refused to rule out changes to the 25% reduction for one-person households. Councils say that getting rid of the discount could raise up to £3 billion a year. But would that be unfair on millions of people, including pensioners and single parents who may be struggling to pay their bills alone? Paula, what do you think about this?
So, Storm, you know my history in terms of my housing. I had 5 years where it was very difficult living out of bin bags, sofa surfing, relying on charity, etc. And then when I was lucky enough, I was then able to take that 25% discount and have my own home. And it was fantastic, it was amazing. But let's be frank, it's a perk. And it's one of those universal perks that we simply cannot afford any longer. And whilst I appreciate that, again, we might be dealing with pensioners in a harsh way, and I want to put pensioners to one side at the moment. I'm talking about the younger people. Look, we need to think about how we house ourselves, multiple home occupations. We can live together now. We can rent out homes together now. We can actually go to older members, senior members of society and say, look, you're in this house all by yourself. Your family has gone. Why don't you rent it out to younger members of the community? We don't need that 25% discount. I tell you who does need the 25% discount. Local authorities need that money in. They are £3 billion we could raise from getting rid of that 25% discount. If you are a parent, for example, in Birmingham, you know what's happening at the moment when you are trying to get your child with special educational needs transport into school. There's a Facebook page with over 600 parents who cannot access that assistance. We know that so many people are struggling at the moment in terms of local authorities. Let's give them that money and help them rebalance that £6 billion deficit that they're having.
So you're happy to raise the money and also maybe encourage people to move in together? We do have a housing crisis, so we don't want to encourage people to live on their own, Charlie. So maybe this is a good move.
Well, I think, first of all, when Paula said we can live together, I thought you were making me an offer.
I was, Charlie, I was.
Moving in, I thought I'm moving in.
And did you see how happy he was about it as well? We can argue every day. How about that?
So healthy.
Over the cornflakes. But I think, look, I take a slightly different view because I think we do have a situation where, you encourage people to live together. And if you are living together, then you will share rent. If you're a married couple or if you're a cohabiting couple or whatever it is, and you buy a house, if you're fortunate enough to buy a house, then you're ultimately splitting the bills. You're sharing the mortgage, in a sense. You're sharing that burden. I think if you're a single person, if you're perhaps on the older end of the spectrum, if you're a pensioner living by themselves, or if you're a single person just living by themselves renting, you're less likely to, I think, use all the services that might be used by cohabiting couples or 2 or 3 people, so less household waste, for example. And so I think just having that discount to make that cost of living a little bit easier for you as an individual, as someone that is single, I think it is actually something that we should be doing. Otherwise, you're pricing people who are single, who might be at times a bit lonely. You're isolating them even more from society. And I'm talking particularly about pensioners when I say that. So I think that discount is needed because it just helps with the cost of living for people that are living alone.
If we are going to go down that route, though, and say that single people should get a discount because they're not having as big an impact on the services, the less domestic waste, then shouldn't we be charging more for households that have larger numbers? So households that have maybe 7 people, families that have a lot of kids, they'll be, taking up far more weight on the services and maybe should pay a little bit extra.
Well, you can. It's an argument. You're absolutely right because I think the council tax is based on the house, my understanding, rather than the occupants.
But this is what I'm saying. So we either base it on what Paul is saying is we base it on the household, or we base it on the number of people in the household. But we're in a halfway house. Pardon the pun, at the moment where we are doing it predominantly on the house, and yet if you're just a single person, you get a little bit of a discount.
Well, I think that's exactly why it's the halfway house, because it is the catch-22 situation of the household or who the occupants of. So having that discount for the single person, I think is absolutely required because of that halfway issue that
would you increase the discount then? Because the other alternative is you have 2 people occupying a house, married couple or whatever, and they're splitting the burden of that financial cost. So maybe 50% off for somebody that lived on their own.
Well, someone lives by themselves that is a single occupant, tempting
You're
as that
quite
is,
like that.
tempting as that is, I don't think the finances would allow for that. I think just a little bit of a discount to help those people who are living by themselves, I think is enough, and that's fine.
I just think when we're talking about those local authorities who we know are in a deficit, some of them declaring what is effectively bankruptcy, and I put the pensioners to one side for a moment, and I'm going to bring them back in here. When we think about, for example, the services, the lack of services for our pensioners, where are they now in terms of that community that we used to have? Where are the Meals on Wheels anymore? Where are the care in the community officers who would be able to go around and check, etc.? That doesn't exist anymore. And if that is something that by you, Charlie, losing that 25% perk, you thought that, OK, me losing that perk means that my old age pensioner next door is actually going to see a benefit. I think we would agree with that.
I think you might have a lot of people on the phone actually saying that you wouldn't give that extra money to the councils because they're mismanaged. So even if we did give them the extra money, we might not see the Meals on Wheels. Pete from Lincolnshire, how do you feel about this 25% off for council tax for being a sole occupant of a house?
Well, I can't see the problem. You've roughly said the same as what I was thinking, because if there's two in the house, they're paying their council tax. Say it was 400 quid. As a single person, they want to pay 300. But if there's four in the house, as in mum, dad, and two children who are all old enough, sort of thing, then they are only still paying £400, which is £100 each they're paying. And yet the single person's paying 300 quid. But as Paula said, get the person who lives by themselves to get somebody else in. Now, if that's a poor pensioner who is claiming benefits, etc., they get somebody else in, all that pension goes and everything else, and they lose everything. So how can that be beneficial? And especially if an old age pensioner lives by themselves for 10 or 15 years, they're not going to want somebody else running around the house.
I do hear what you're saying there. I don't think they would lose their pension, but there might be some benefits that they lose. But I suppose that's something that could be worked out.
I mean, for me, Pete, though, I think just as society as a whole, we kind of forget that we do need each other. We're a very social breed of animal. And when you think we have so many pensioners who are millionaire property rich, they are living in these homes that they want to be able to maintain, they want to be able to keep, but they're struggling to afford to heat their homes, etc. Just think, if you rented your room out to a couple of 20-year-olds who are just trying to find their feet, how that would help that pensioner. Then there'd also be somebody there checking in on the pensioner. There would also be somebody there for the younger people. Yeah, absolutely. So this is about a societal decision that we would be consciously making to say, come on, guys, let's pull together.
You're looking shocked by this, Charlie.
I wouldn't even rent my spare room out to a 20-year-old, let alone a pensioner.
But do you see?
But
can you see any advantages to? And I'll put this question to you too, Pete. Charlie, can you see any advantages to having intergenerational living that we miss out in the way that we set up society nowadays that used to just be the norm?
Totally. And the young can absolutely learn from the old because of the experience and life that they've gone through, and vice versa. When it comes to technology and AI, we know that through our own families and grandparents. And I'm still very fortunate to have two of mine who are sort of 93 and 94.
Wow.
So even the most basic of conversation can be difficult at times, but you learn from the stories that they have and vice versa. So I absolutely understand the intergenerational sort of benefits. But living with someone and living in a household is quite different. And I think most pensioners, yes, they might be asset rich because they're living in a property that has gained wealth. But they're cash poor. So when it comes to the winter fuel allowance, I think that's vital to keep. If you then take away this single person's discount, you're putting even more pensioners perhaps into poverty.
Potentially. Pete, though, can you see any benefits of the intergenerational living?
No, because I used to do that.
Oh, okay.
I got divorced, etc., and then I said, I'll have somebody living in the house.
Yeah.
And I got so fed up because they didn't go by house rules. Simple
your rules,
like
Pete.
Smoking.
It doesn't sound like house rules, it sounds like your rules.
No.
Which is
but
fine.
Smoking. I just said no smoking upstairs,
Okay,
in the bedrooms.
that seems fair.
And they didn't want to know, so I threw them out. And now, being a pensioner, I want to live by myself. I don't want a young 25-year-old coming in at 3 o'clock in the morning, half cut, and a policeman behind him
Well,
sort of saying,
Pete-
why is he doing this?
Pete, you're not alone, but Charlie's not a pensioner yet, and he wouldn't have it. So,
And I'm not a 20-year-old Pete anymore.
I don't think you're alone in that, Pete. Thank you very much for your call. Becky from Staffordshire, what's your view on this?
Well, I know that you've been speaking about pensioners just recently. However, I'm just going to put a different perspective on it. So I've recently come out of a domestic abuse situation where I am currently living on my own.
Okay.
And I don't really want to live with anybody else. Not at this point in time. And I do think it's a bit unfair that they penalise people like your last caller who don't particularly want to live with somebody else, at the minute. And I know I've got friends who are in couples who are splitting the bill, but I have to pay everything myself. And I do work, but I don't receive any benefit. And it's just another hit to me having to then find this additional money which could go towards other bills. And I just think sometimes they do penalise single people, and especially, people who might not want to live with somebody else.
And particularly at the moment for you, Becky, feeling quite vulnerable as you would, being in the situation that you are. But it may be that there's just been a divorce and you've got a mother with a couple of children having to live in a house and paying all the bills. There's lots of other circumstances. You're absolutely right to bring up the fact that it isn't just pensioners. But then if we're going to give a discount for somebody living on their own because they don't use the services quite as much, do we then need to charge more for bigger families because they will be taking up more of the services by the council?
No, because again, luckily I don't have this situation. However, I've known people where they've been single parents and the other parent has not paid child maintenance support. They don't contribute at all to any of the child bills, and that person is struggling. Just because they're using more services, it doesn't mean they need to be penalised. Again, they're a single person providing for their children. It might be they don't get this additional money from their ex-partner.
You're absolutely right. Maybe, but and then the argument would be we need to put more pressure on the other parent, whether that's the dad or the mother, to contribute financially where they can. But Becky, maybe we don't do children, then maybe we do once the child becomes of working age or starts working, and that's when the bill goes up for them. So it's the adults in the household have to split it. Would that then be fair?
Can I?
I think if there's another income coming in, possibly yes.
Okay.
Again, it could be means tested. However, again, it's this additional pressure of the one income. There's one income household which are having all this pressure. Then it is a lot easier if there's more than one income coming into the house. You're splitting it.
Okay, Becky, thank you very much for your call, and best of luck with your journey going forward. Sorry, Paula, you were going to come in.
I wanted to first of all congratulate Becky on being a survivor of domestic abuse, but I wanted to challenge her. You'll know that I represent lots of survivors of domestic abuse, both male, female, disabled, those who represent the LGBTQ TQ plus community. And one of the biggest bugbears for me, Storm, is that when they want to be able to access counselling, when they want to be able to access therapy for their children, it simply isn't there. It isn't available. It isn't affordable. And you would look to your local authority to be able to do that. And so this brings us back to the question of, if you knew that your tax was going to go back to the council to pay for a service where members of the, vulnerable members of the community were going to get the help that they needed, like Becky and like others like Becky, would you not agree to that? I would.
Well, that's a question as to whether everybody across the board would pay more in order to get better services, and that's a debate we could have another day on its own. Diane from Northumberland, how do you feel about the discount for people living on their own?
Well, I think what other way other than stopping our blood, or can they batter us this time?
Diane, who are you referring to by us?
Pardon?
Who are you referring to when you say in what other way can they batter us? Who are you?
Well, the government and people who live on their own.
Okay, so we're talking about pensioners, single parents, maybe just young professionals who have chosen to live on their own.
Yes.
Okay.
They go from one nightmare to another. I've just got my television licence in to keep Gary Lineker and his $1.5 million a year. I only watch ITV and Channel 5. I don't watch BBC at all.
You don't consume any of their news? You don't consume any of their news outputs or listen to any of their radio stations or...
No, nothing at all.
Right.
And to me, this Labour government, every time you put the television on, you think, well, what are we going to get battered with now?
And can I ask, Diane, are you of pensionable age? Are you annoyed about the winter fuel allowance?
I'm 77. I don't want a lodger. I have my little grandson comes and stays over sometimes.
Lovely.
I couldn't stand any crazy youngsters running around the house at my age.
But do you appreciate that we have an issue with a housing crisis, and actually it may help if more people lived in multi-occupancy properties? We potentially have too many people, 8 million people in this country living on their own in a property.
Well, there was a man on the television last night. He has 100 houses, and they were on about rents.
Yes.
He rents out 100 houses.
Yes.
He wasn't English. I don't know what nationality he was. So that could be 100 people get a house.
Yeah, but he rents them out, so there are probably more than 100 people living in those properties. Diane, slightly off the topic, what we're talking about here is encouraging more than one person to live in a property because we have so few of them. And
yes,
it might be nice to get a lodger, Diane, do you not think? Somebody that would always be in the house?
No, definitely not.
No. What puts you off?
I enjoy my peace and quiet.
What puts you off, Diane, out of interest?
I don't need anybody living with me.
No, you might not need it, but it might be nice.
Anybody living with me. I have beds for my children and my grandson when I need them.
OK, Diane, thank you very much for your call. Not wanting a lodger there. Susan from Shropshire, what's your thoughts on this? Should we scrap the 25% off for living on your own?
Definitely not. I'm 68. I worked out that my state pension and my small pension that I get privately comes to just over £15,000 a year. I sat down and worked my expenses out yesterday, and I've got, at the end of paying everything out, council tax, rent, housing insurance, etc., I've got £140 that month to spend on food for myself, and I've got a small cat, and that's it. I'm absolutely petrified. I can't sleep at night through worrying about this, and it's the first thing that I think of when I wake up in the morning. I'm just so scared of what this government's doing to me and doing to other people like me. I think they've got a plot in mind that actually they want us all to die so that the NHS will run a bit better.
I mean, I can understand your frustration and your upset, particularly when you've went through your finances and you're ending up in that situation. Is there anything you could do? Is there a possibility of moving? Would you consider moving into a property with another individual in order to bring down your bills? Because it would substantially.
I lost my mother 2 years ago. I nursed her through Alzheimer's and dementia. We've been in this house for nearly 40 years. You know, it's our home. It's not just a house. It's a home. And we've spent a lot of money. Well, I've spent a lot of money on the house. We've got lovely gardens front and back. It's rented. It's not my property, but it's my home. And
Susan,
it's decorated throughout beautifully, you know. So, you know, it's more than bricks and mortar.
I completely understand that. But Susan, do you understand that some people might be listening to you who can't afford to live on their own, who have to live with other people, would see what you're doing as a choice rather than it being put upon you, Susan, that you are choosing to live in a place that you consider home more than bricks and mortar, and so you're making sacrifices, and that is totally acceptable too.
Well, I'll tell you this. Where I live in Telford, there's an area called Lawley, and they built that many houses down there. I keep hearing, oh, we need more houses, we need more houses. Not in Telford. Lawley is a town now within the town. It's that massive. And they're building everywhere here, and this was before they were saying we need more houses. I think we've got all the houses that the country needs just in Telford.
You certainly
So,
don't have all the houses that the country needs. That is for absolute sure, and I think Labour will tell you. I think all the parties will actually tell you that. But you might be the exception to the rule where there is actually quite a lot of properties being built in your area. But that takes away from my statement. My statement is a lot of people will see what you're doing is a choice, and although you are really financially strapped because of those choices, it is in fact a decision to continue living in your home.
Well, I think this country should look after me slightly because I'm 68 now. I finished work, and it's the least that the country can do for me to look after me in my old age.
What would you say to
that's
Paula?
wrong.
The way Paula feels, and she barely has enough to spend on food, £100 and something pounds on food,
Susan
and
said,
that's not even just going out for a day or doing something else.
I mean, there was two things that arose out of what you said, Susan, the heartbreak that we can all feel in the studio from what you've said. The first thing is to please make sure that you access any assistance that you can in terms of what benefits you are available to you. You must do that because we were told recently by a journalist that something like 880,000 people who are eligible for pension credit and other benefits have not been claiming them. So you really must, Susan, when you can, go out to your benefit agency and find out what is available to you. The second thing is, Susan, this is exactly actually what I was talking about, Storm, in terms of helping our local authorities. Susan, you know that there is a massive deficit for many of our local authorities, and that deficit hole needs to be filled. And you could be one of those people who actually receives support from your local authority if that 25% discount was taken away from many of those single people who don't actually need it.
But
I suspect
Susan
it would
wouldn't be able to pay it, is her problem.
Well, I suspect it would be means tested. So we need to look at how it would affect people. And maybe Susan would fall into the bracket where actually she would still be eligible for the discount.
OK, Susan, thank you very much for your call and just putting that into a picture for us. Thanks for all your calls on this. We are going to have to move on.